boy would walk past the big building every day on his way home, and every day he felt the pull of something inside him that he couldn't explain. Through the tall glass windows, he could see a piano, polished and gleaming, sitting in a room that smelled faintly of wood and music. He didn't know how to play it, not really. He had never touched a piano before, except for an old keyboard at home that made tinny sounds. But he could feel music inside him, a rhythm that seemed to live in his fingers and heart. He wanted nothing more than to make those keys sing. He would stop and watch whenever the door was open. He would see children and adults sitting around, their fingers moving gracefully over the keys, creating melodies that made the boy's chest ache with longing. Sometimes he would hear someone playing a familiar tune, something soft and beautiful, and he would imagine himself there, sitting in that chair, his own fingers dancing over the keys. But every time he tried to step inside, someone would gently, but firmly, stop him. "Not now," they would say. "You're too young." Or sometimes, "Maybe another time." Their words didn't discourage him. They made him more determined. At home, he would practice on his old keyboard, though it barely worked. He would press the keys one by one, trying to copy the melodies he heard. Sometimes the notes came out wrong, clunky and awkward, but he didn't care. He felt like the music was inside him, and even if the keyboard couldn't carry it, he could feel it in his fingers. He spent hours imagining each note, hearing it perfectly in his mind before he even pressed a key. It was a secret joy, a world only he knew. His parents noticed how much he loved music. They weren't rich, and they didn't know anyone who could teach him properly. But they saw the passion in his eyes, the way his face would light up when he spoke about music, the way he would tap imaginary notes on any surface he could find. They tried to encourage him, clapping when he got a tune right on his keyboard, smiling even when it sounded off. But they knew it wasn't the same as the piano he dreamed of. Every day after school, he would return to the building, hoping for a chance. Sometimes, he would peek inside the window, watching the shadows of hands moving gracefully, imagining his own fingers doing the same. Other times, he would stand by the door, his small hand pressed against the glass, willing someone to notice him. He didn't beg out loud. He just wished, silently, that someone would let him try. One rainy afternoon, he pressed his face against the wet glass and watched as a teacher guided a young girl through a piece she was learning. The girl's fingers slipped, and the teacher corrected her gently. The boy's heart ached to be in that seat, to feel the smooth keys under his fingertips, to hear the music come from him. He closed his eyes and imagined the notes flowing perfectly, one after the other, as if the piano itself knew him and wanted to sing with him. Weeks passed like this. Every day he returned. Every day he hoped. Every day he went home with his longing heavier than before. He began to hum the tunes he imagined, filling his small room with music no one else could hear. His parents noticed that humming and smiled, but they didn't understand the depth of his desire. It was more than love for music. It was a need, a calling. He could feel it in his bones, and he couldn't ignore it. One morning, he found a small flyer stuck to the door of the building. It said something about a music recital, a chance for beginners to try the piano under guidance. His heart leapt. He ran home to show it to his parents, who looked at him with cautious hope. They encouraged him to go, to try, and he clutched the flyer like a treasure. It was his chance, his opening to the world he had dreamed of. The day of the recital, he wore his best clothes, though they were simple and a little worn. He carried himself with nervous excitement, his stomach twisting in a mix of fear and anticipation. When he entered the room, the smell of polished wood and faint candle wax hit him, and he froze for a moment. The piano was larger than he had imagined, with shining black and white keys that seemed to call his name. Other children were there, their fingers tapping lightly on the keys as they warmed up, and he felt both nervous and thrilled. He approached a teacher and asked quietly if he could try. The teacher looked at him, a little surprised by his eagerness. "Are you sure? You haven't had lessons?" the teacher said. The boy nodded, his eyes wide with determination. The teacher hesitated, then motioned him to the piano. "Just for a few minutes," the teacher said. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. He pressed the first note, soft and hesitant. Then another and another. Something inside him woke up, a flow of sound he had imagined for years. The notes came together, clumsy at first, but then smoother, more confident. He didn't look at the keys. He didn't need to. His fingers seemed to know where to go. The room grew quiet as others watched, their eyes widening in surprise. The melody grew, simple at first, but then more beautiful, more alive. The boy's heart raced, and he lost himself in the music. Every note seemed to tell a story, every chord a wave of emotion. The teacher and the audience were silent, mesmerized. They had expected a child trying for the first time, but this was something else. Something magical. Something they couldn't explain. When the last note faded, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the room erupted in applause. The boy's face flushed, a mixture of joy, relief, and disbelief. He had touched the piano and created something beautiful, something real. He had made music, not with training, not with practice, but with something deeper, something that had always been inside him. That day, he realized that his love for music, his patience, and his endless hope had led him to a moment he would never forget. After that first moment with the piano, the boy's world changed, but not in the way he had imagined. The applause and smiles from the small recital filled him with pride, yet a part of him felt uncertain. The teachers who had watched him carefully that day looked at him with surprise, but they also seemed cautious. Some praised his talent gently, while others reminded him that he needed proper training to truly grow. The boy listened to all of it, nodding quietly, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. He had touched something magical, but he didn't fully understand it yet. Every day after that, he returned to the community center, hoping for another chance to sit at the piano. Sometimes the room was busy with lessons, and he would have to wait, standing quietly in a corner, watching the other students. He noticed how their fingers moved, how they watched the teacher's hands, how they practiced scales and small pieces. He tried to copy them in his mind, but he realized that the music inside him was different. It was freer, flowing in ways that could not always be taught. Still, he understood that to reach new heights, he had to learn some of the rules, even if he did not want to be confined by them. At home, his practice took on a new intensity. He no longer just tapped on his old keyboard. He tried to create melodies that came from his imagination. He spent hours listening to music, feeling each note and rhythm in his chest. He would play slowly at first, then try to speed up, sometimes making mistakes, sometimes creating something that surprised even him. His parents watched, amazed at his dedication, and they tried to support him as best as they could. Even though they didn't know much about music, they bought him small books and guides, and they would clap whenever he finished a piece, but they always reminded him to enjoy what he was doing and not stress too much. The boy smiled at their encouragement, but his mind was full of dreams he couldn't yet reach. One afternoon, as he practiced, a teacher from the community center came to visit. She had seen him play at the recital, and she had heard about his persistence. She watched him quietly for a few minutes, her expression thoughtful. Then she spoke softly, asking him about the music he imagined, about the melodies he heard in his mind. The boy explained eagerly, moving his hands as he described the notes. The teacher listened, nodding slowly, and then she offered him a challenge. She said he could try a short piece, something simple but with a small chance to create his own interpretation. The boy's heart jumped. He agreed immediately, and together they chose a short melody that would give him room to explore. The next day he sat at the piano with the teacher by his side. His fingers hovered above the keys, and he took a deep breath. The teacher reminded him gently, "Play slowly at first, listen to each note, and then let your feelings guide you." He nodded and pressed the first key. The sound filled the room, soft and steady. He pressed the next key, then the next, and slowly a melody began to take shape. It was imperfect, yet it carried something real, something that moved anyone who listened. The teacher watched, a smile spreading across her face, recognizing the raw emotion in every note. She didn't correct him much, just encouraged him to continue, to trust what he felt. Word of his talent began to spread. Other teachers mentioned his playing to students, and people at the community center started to notice the boy who could make music with a feeling that could not be learned from books. Some children were curious and shyly asked him to show them what he could do. He welcomed them, guiding them through simple notes, helping them feel the music in their own hands. He was gentle and patient, sharing what little he knew, but he never lost sight of his own goal. Each time he played, he felt a step closer to the music inside him becoming real in the world outside his imagination. There were challenges, of course. Some days, his fingers seemed clumsy, or the notes didn't come out as he wanted. He would feel frustrated, staring at the keys, wondering if he was really good enough. But he never gave up. He learned to breathe, to pause, and to let the music come naturally. Sometimes, after a long day of practice, he would close his eyes and play without thinking, just following the rhythm that lived in him. Those moments were magical, and they reminded him why he loved music so much. He also began to notice the power of music on others. When he played, even briefly, he saw people smile, relax, and sometimes even wipe away tears. He realized that music could speak without words, that it could reach the hearts of people who had nothing else to say. This thought filled him with determination. He didn't want to play just for himself. He wanted to share the joy and wonder that music brought him. He wanted others to feel the same magic he felt every time his fingers touched the keys. One evening, as he was leaving the community center, a woman approached him. She had a gentle voice and kind eyes. She told him she had been watching him for some time and that she thought he had something special. She asked if he would be interested in learning more with her guidance in a more structured way. The boy's eyes widened. He wanted to say yes immediately, but he also felt nervous. This was a new step, a bigger opportunity than he had ever imagined. He nodded slowly, his heart racing, and they arranged to meet the next day. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the piano, the keys, the music, and the possibilities. He imagined himself playing in a larger room, with more people listening, with his fingers dancing freely over the keys, and creating melodies that moved everyone. He felt a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. Could he really reach that level? Could he make the music he heard in his mind real for others? The questions didn't scare him. They motivated him. He wanted to work hard, to practice more, and to prove that his love for music could take him further than he had ever dreamed. The next day, he arrived at the community center early. The woman was waiting, smiling warmly. She introduced herself as his new mentor and explained that they would begin with simple exercises, learning the basics carefully. The boy listened, eager and attentive. Even though he had already created beautiful music from his imagination, he understood that this guidance could help him refine his skills and reach new heights. He felt grateful for the chance, and he promised himself that he would give everything he had. As he began his first lesson, he noticed how different it was from anything he had done before. There were rules and techniques, patterns and exercises. Sometimes he struggled, his fingers not moving the way he wanted. But the woman was patient, encouraging him, showing him small adjustments that made a big difference. He began to understand that talent alone was not enough. It had to be nurtured, shaped, and practiced. He felt challenged but also inspired. Every small improvement filled him with pride and joy. Weeks passed, and the boy continued to practice diligently. He balanced his time between the lessons, the old keyboard at home, and his imagination. He started to notice changes in his playing. The melodies were smoother, more precise, but still carried the emotion and feeling that made his music special. He could play both what he imagined and what he had learned from lessons, blending them together in a way that felt natural. The community center began to recognize him as a young musician with real potential, someone to watch and support. Despite the progress, he never lost the wonder he had felt that first day he touched the piano. Every time he sat down, he felt that spark, that connection with something larger than himself. He understood that music was not just about skill or technique. It was about expression, about sharing a part of oneself with the world. And so, every day, he practiced with patience and passion, driven by the desire to reach the place in music that he had imagined for so long, and to inspire others with the magic that had first captured his heart. As the weeks turned into months, the boy's connection with the piano deepened. Each day he sat at the instrument, he discovered something new. The keys seemed to respond to his touch, almost as if they recognized him and wanted to cooperate. Some days were frustrating. There were moments when his fingers refused to move the way he imagined, when a melody he had created in his mind didn't come out as clearly as he wanted. But he had learned from his mentor that patience was part of music, just as much as talent. Every mistake was a lesson, every pause a chance to reflect, and every correct note a small victory. His mentor guided him with gentle encouragement. She taught him scales and exercises, and she explained the theory behind chords and melodies. At first, it felt tedious to the boy who had been used to playing from feeling rather than rules. But gradually, he began to understand how these lessons could make him stronger. They didn't take away from the music he loved. They gave him tools to shape it, to make it clearer, more powerful. He realized that knowledge and instinct could work together, creating a kind of harmony that made playing even more satisfying. He started to notice changes in himself. His fingers were faster, more precise, and his memory for melodies improved. He could recall long pieces of music he had learned and recreate them without looking at a sheet. But the most exciting change was how freely he could now express the feelings inside him. When he played, people could sense the emotion in every note. They didn't just hear the music, they felt it. And this made him happier than any praise or recognition ever could. One afternoon, the community center organized a small informal concert. Children and adults who had been learning music were invited to perform. The boy felt nervous but excited. He wanted to play a piece that was both beautiful and meaningful. He had spent hours practicing, choosing notes and rhythms that reflected what he felt inside. His mentor smiled at him and reminded him to focus not on the audience, but on the music itself. When it was his turn, he walked to the piano, took a deep breath and pressed the first key. The room fell silent. As his fingers moved, a melody filled the space, gentle at first, then rising with emotion and strength. He closed his eyes and let the music guide him. Every note was a part of his story. The longing he had felt when he first saw the piano, the hours of practice alone at home, the excitement of learning new skills. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward, some held their breath, and some smiled with tears in their eyes. When the last note faded, the applause was warm and genuine. The boy felt a thrill, but more importantly, he felt pride and joy that came from sharing something deeply personal. After the concert, several adults and teachers approached him. They praised his talent and asked questions about how he had learned to play so expressively. The boy smiled and explained that it had taken time, patience, and a lot of practice. He mentioned how his mentor had helped him, how he had learned new skills, and how he had tried to combine them with the music he felt inside. People were impressed, not just by his skill, but by his dedication and humility. It was the first time he realized that music could connect people in a profound way. With the recognition came new opportunities. Some local musicians invited him to small gatherings and recitals. Others offered to introduce him to more advanced lessons or to help him get instruments and materials that could further his skills. The boy was thrilled but also careful. He didn't want to rush, didn't want to lose the joy of playing the piano for himself. He continued to balance his formal learning with the music that came naturally from his heart. Every day he practiced for hours, experimenting with new melodies, combining what he had learned with what he imagined at home. His parents noticed the change too. They saw him spending long hours at the piano, sometimes late into the evening, lost in his world of music. They were amazed at how focused he had become, at how deeply he cared about his progress. They also noticed his happiness, the way his eyes lit up when he played, the way he hummed tunes even when no one was around. They didn't fully understand the technical aspects, but they felt the emotion and were proud. They encouraged him, bought him small gifts related to music, and always reminded him to keep enjoying the journey. Despite the growing attention, the boy remained humble. He never looked down on others, never bragged about his talent. When younger students asked for guidance, he helped them patiently. When other children played in ways that were different from his own style, he watched with curiosity and learned from them too. He understood that music was bigger than any one person, that it was a language everyone could speak in their own way. This respect for music and for others became a defining part of who he was. One day, while practicing a new piece, he felt an idea for a melody come to him suddenly. It wasn't based on any lesson or sheet music. It was pure inspiration. He followed it instinctively, letting his fingers move freely over the keys. The sound that emerged was unlike anything he had played before. It was soft, flowing, and full of emotion, yet structured enough to be recognizable as a melody. He realized that months of learning, practicing, and observing others had allowed him to turn inspiration into music. He smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. This was the moment he had been working toward, combining imagination, skill, and expression. Excited, he played the piece for his mentor. She listened quietly, her expression thoughtful, and when he finished, she nodded with a smile. "You are learning to speak with the piano, not just play it," she said. "Every note tells a story now, and that story is yours." The boy felt a swell of pride, but also humility. He understood that music was endless, that there were always new things to learn, and that he had only just begun to explore what he could do. The boy also began to notice the emotional impact his music had on people more clearly. Friends, family, and teachers often commented on how his playing made them feel calm, inspired, or even emotional. He learned to pay attention to these reactions, realizing that music was a way to communicate feelings that words could not capture. He began to compose small pieces for events at the community center, using his music to bring people together. Each composition reflected a part of his life: joy, hope, struggle, or curiosity. Through these experiences, he felt that he was contributing something meaningful to the world, not just entertaining, but touching hearts. Despite all the progress and recognition, the boy remained deeply connected to the excitement he had felt the first time he touched the piano. Every new challenge reminded him of the wonder of discovering music. He practiced daily, sometimes facing frustration, sometimes experiencing breakthroughs, but always returning to the feeling of joy that had first captured him. He understood that success wasn't just about talent or applause. It was about persistence, love for the craft, and the courage to express oneself fully. The community center, recognizing his growth, decided to feature him in a small showcase. It was an opportunity for him to perform for a larger audience, including people who had never seen him play. The boy felt nervous but also confident. He prepared carefully, choosing a piece that combined his technical skills with the emotion he had developed over months of practice. On the day of the showcase, he arrived early, sat at the piano, and took a deep breath. When he began to play, the room fell silent, and he felt the music flow through him naturally. Every note carried his story, every chord connected with the audience, and when the final note faded, the applause was heartfelt and long. He felt a sense of fulfillment, realizing that all the waiting, all the practice, all the patience had led to this moment. Through these experiences, the boy understood that talent alone was not enough to succeed. Dedication, persistence, humility, and the willingness to learn were equally important. He continued to grow, both as a musician and as a person, embracing challenges, celebrating achievements, and sharing the beauty of music with everyone around him. Each day at the piano was a journey, and he knew that the story of his music had only just begun as the boy continued to grow in skill and confidence. The music he played began to attract more attention. People outside the community center had heard whispers about the young musician who could play with feeling beyond his years. Invitations came for him to perform at small events, charity gatherings, and local ceremonies. At first, he felt nervous about stepping outside the familiar space of the piano room he had come to know so well. But each opportunity gave him a chance to experience something new, and he embraced it with quiet courage. At one such event, a small hall was filled with people who had never seen him play. The boy's heart raced as he walked to the piano, his fingers brushing lightly against the keys. He took a deep breath, remembering all the lessons, all the practice, and all the moments he had spent imagining music. He closed his eyes and let the melody flow from him, feeling the notes rise and fall, carrying a story of longing, hope, and joy. The audience sat in silence, captivated by the emotion in his playing. He could sense their attention, their curiosity, their amazement, and it filled him with a quiet pride. The melody built slowly, gentle and soft, then grew more expressive, rising and falling like waves. Each note seemed to reach the hearts of those listening. Some people smiled, some had tears in their eyes, and others simply leaned forward, caught in the beauty of the music. The boy was completely absorbed, losing himself in the sound. For him, it was not about applause or recognition. It was about connecting with people, about sharing the music that lived inside him. When the final note faded, the hall erupted in spontaneous applause. He opened his eyes, and for a moment, he saw a mixture of wonder and gratitude on every face. It was a moment he would never forget. After the performance, several musicians approached him, impressed by the natural emotion and skill in his playing. They asked him questions, offered advice, and shared stories of their own experiences with music. The boy listened carefully, soaking up every word. He realized that music was a lifelong journey, and even the most talented players never stopped learning. He felt encouraged, knowing that he was only at the beginning of what he could accomplish. His mentor had taught him well. Talent could take someone far, but dedication, humility, and openness to learning were equally important. Back at the community center, the boy's reputation grew. Other students looked up to him, eager to see how he practiced, how he approached new pieces, and how he expressed himself. He was patient and generous with his time, showing them simple techniques, encouraging them to find their own style, and sharing tips on how to listen carefully to the music they created. He had learned that teaching others helped him understand music even more deeply. Each time he guided a student, he felt a new kind of satisfaction, knowing that his love for music could inspire and uplift others. One afternoon, a local newspaper sent a reporter to the community center. The boy's story was featured in a small article, highlighting his journey from a curious child peering through the windows to a young musician playing with real emotion. He felt a mix of pride and nervousness as his story was shared with the community. Some friends and neighbors came to see him play, and their admiration and encouragement strengthened his confidence. He began to understand that music could touch people in ways words sometimes could not, and that his playing could make a positive difference in the world. Despite his growing recognition, the boy remained humble and focused on his practice. He still spent hours at the piano every day, experimenting with new melodies and refining old ones. Some days he struggled with difficult pieces, his fingers failing to find the right notes. Other days, inspiration struck, and he created music effortlessly, letting his emotions guide every chord. He learned to be patient with himself, to understand that growth came in waves, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but always moving forward. One day, he was asked to perform at a small charity event to raise funds for children's education. The boy felt honored and nervous, knowing that people were counting on him to create a meaningful performance. He prepared carefully, selecting a piece that combined technical skill with emotional depth. When the day came, he walked onto the stage and sat at the piano, his hands trembling slightly. He took a deep breath, recalling all the moments that had brought him here. The long hours of practice, the encouragement of his mentor, the quiet determination to keep going despite setbacks. Then he began to play. The music flowed smoothly, soft at first, then building with intensity and feeling. The audience was captivated, drawn into the story that unfolded through his fingers. Some people closed their eyes, swaying gently with the rhythm. Others leaned forward, holding their breath at the beauty of each note. The boy felt a deep connection with every listener, knowing that his music could reach them in a personal way. By the time the last note faded, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by applause, cheers, and even a few tears. He smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had given his best and shared something valuable. After the event, several musicians approached him, expressing their admiration and offering guidance for future opportunities. The boy listened carefully, grateful for the advice but determined to continue growing at his own pace. He knew that every performance, every lesson, and every practice session was part of a larger journey. He felt motivated to explore new styles, try new pieces, and continue developing the unique voice that had always lived in his heart. At home, his parents noticed the changes in their child. They saw not only his growing skill but also his maturity, his dedication, and his sense of responsibility. He began to take ownership of his practice, setting goals for himself and reflecting on his progress. He understood that success was not about immediate recognition but about consistent effort, patience, and a love for what he was doing. His parents felt proud, not just of his talent, but of his character and the way he treated others with kindness and respect. The boy also learned to balance his music with other aspects of life. He continued to attend school, spend time with family, and enjoy simple pleasures like walks in the park or playing with friends. He realized that life outside the piano room enriched his music, giving him experiences and emotions to draw upon when creating melodies. He felt grateful for every moment, understanding that music was not just an activity, but a way of living, a lens through which he could experience the world more deeply. One quiet evening, as he practiced alone in the community center, he paused to reflect on how far he had come. He remembered the first day he had pressed the keys, the frustration of not being allowed to try, the hours spent on his old keyboard, and the first time he had played in front of an audience. Each memory carried a lesson: patience, determination, courage, and the joy of following one's passion. He realized that music had transformed his life, giving him confidence, purpose, and a way to connect with others. He felt a sense of peace and gratitude, knowing that the journey was ongoing, full of possibilities and discoveries. In the months that followed, the boy continued to perform at events, create new melodies, and inspire other students. He began to dream of even bigger stages, perhaps one day playing in larger halls or sharing his music with people far beyond his community. Yet he never lost sight of the importance of the small moments, the quiet practice sessions, the encouragement from his mentor, the smiles of listeners touched by his music. He understood that every note mattered, every effort counted, and every experience contributed to the person and musician he was becoming. Through it all, the boy remained humble, focused, and deeply connected to the joy of creating music. He knew that his journey was only beginning, that there were countless melodies waiting to be discovered, and that the piano would always be his companion, his teacher, and his friend. Every time he sat down to play, he felt the same thrill he had felt the first day he touched the keys, and he knew that as long as he continued to follow his heart, the music would never end. As the boy grew older, his talent and love for music only deepened. He had moved from simply touching the piano to creating melodies that stirred people's hearts. Each performance he gave became more confident, more expressive, and more full of life. He could feel the music inside him, like a river flowing through his fingers, and he knew that it had a purpose beyond just notes on a page. It was a way to connect with people, to share emotion, and to inspire. The community around him continued to notice his growth. Teachers, friends, and even strangers began to recognize him as someone special, someone who could bring a room to life with the sound of a piano. Invitations came to perform in bigger events, sometimes even outside his town. Each invitation was exciting but also intimidating. He felt the weight of expectation and the pressure to perform perfectly. Yet, he remembered what his mentor had taught him. The music was about feeling and expression, not just perfection. He decided to focus on the joy of playing rather than fear of mistakes. One day, a local arts council invited him to perform in a formal concert hall. The hall was much larger than any place he had played before, with rows of seats stretching back into shadow and lights shining down on the stage. He felt nervous as he approached the grand piano, but he also felt a deep excitement. He could hear the echoes of his own heartbeat as he sat down and let his hands hover over the keys. Taking a deep breath, he began to play. The first notes were soft, delicate, and careful. Gradually, the melody grew stronger, flowing with confidence and feeling. Every person in the hall was drawn into the story he was telling through music. He felt a sense of unity with the audience, each note connecting him to every listener in a way words never could. After the concert, many people approached him to express how moved they were. Some spoke of tears, some of memories awakened, and some of the pure joy they had felt listening. The boy listened quietly, feeling proud but also humbled. He realized that music had a power he had never imagined as a child peering through a window, wishing to touch the piano. He understood now that this power came not from skill alone, but from patience, persistence, and a willingness to follow his passion, even when the path was difficult. His mentor remained by his side, guiding him, encouraging him, and reminding him to stay grounded. She emphasized that music was a lifelong journey and that even the most accomplished musicians never stopped learning. The boy listened, absorbing every word. He practiced diligently, exploring new pieces and experimenting with melodies that came from his imagination. Sometimes he would stay at the piano late into the evening, letting the music take him wherever it wished, losing track of time. Those moments were sacred to him, and they reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. Over time, he began to teach others as well. Children who were curious about the piano sought his guidance, and he was patient and generous with them. He showed them simple techniques, encouraged them to listen to the music they created, and shared tips for feeling confident when performing. Teaching helped him grow even more, as it allowed him to understand music from different perspectives. He realized that sharing knowledge and inspiring others was just as important as performing himself. The joy of seeing someone else succeed because of his help brought a new kind of satisfaction. As his reputation grew, he was invited to participate in collaborative performances with other musicians. At first, he was intimidated by playing alongside experienced artists, worried that he might not match their skill. But as soon as he began, he found that collaboration was another form of expression, a conversation between instruments and hearts. He learned to listen, to adjust, and to add his voice in harmony with others. Each performance became a lesson in cooperation, creativity, and respect. He discovered that music was not only personal but also communal, and that the connections it created were just as important as the melodies themselves. Through these experiences, the boy matured not only as a musician but as a person. He became aware of the responsibility that came with his talent, the ability to inspire, to comfort, and to unite people through music. He remained humble, understanding that talent alone was not enough. He kept learning, kept practicing, and kept challenging himself. He learned to handle criticism with grace and to see mistakes as opportunities for growth. Each day was a step forward, a new chance to explore the vast world of music that had first captured his heart. Even as he gained recognition and performed in front of larger audiences, he never forgot the simple joy of playing alone, without expectation or pressure. Those quiet moments at the piano were where he felt free, where he could experiment, create, and feel music as it lived inside him. He often returned to his old community center, where it all began, to play in the small room where the piano had first taught him wonder. These sessions reminded him of the passion that had started everything and kept him grounded despite the growing fame. One day, he was asked to perform at a festival celebrating young artists. The festival was a big stage, with an audience from many towns and cities. He felt nervous but also ready. He carefully prepared, selecting pieces that reflected both his technical skill and his emotional depth. When he arrived at the stage, the lights and the size of the hall made his heart race. But as soon as he sat down and placed his fingers on the keys, the nerves melted away. He began to play, letting the music flow naturally, guided by years of practice, imagination, and emotion. The audience was spellbound, and for a few moments, time seemed to pause as the melody carried them away. The applause at the end was thunderous, but the boy felt calm and satisfied, knowing that he had shared his heart through music. The experiences continued to shape him. He began to compose his own pieces, blending the lessons he had learned with the melodies that came from his imagination. His compositions were personal and expressive, reflecting his journey, emotions, and dreams. Each piece was an opportunity to tell a story, to create something unique, and to connect with others on a deep level. He submitted some compositions to competitions, received feedback, and continued to refine his craft. He understood that every note, every choice, and every moment of practice was part of building a musical voice that was entirely his own. At home, His parents watched him with pride and amazement. They had seen the boy who once pressed his face against a window, longing to touch the piano, grow into a musician capable of inspiring entire audiences. They knew the journey had not been easy. They had supported him through small keyboards, lessons, failures, and victories. Now they saw a young artist who was not only talented but also kind, humble, and dedicated. Their pride was quiet but immense, a reflection of the journey they had shared with him. In the quiet of his practice room, the boy often reflected on the lessons he had learned. He understood that talent alone could not create wonder. It required patience, persistence, and heart. He remembered the people who had doubted him at first, who had told him he could not play or was too young. He thought about the first time he pressed the keys and the moments of joy, frustration, and discovery that followed. Each memory reminded him that his journey was about more than music. It was about hope, determination, and the courage to follow one's dreams. As he continued to perform, teach, and compose, the boy realized that the piano had given him more than music. It had given him confidence, purpose, and a way to touch the hearts of others. It had taught him patience, humility, and the importance of hard work. It had shown him that perseverance, even in the face of doubt, could lead to moments of true wonder. He felt grateful for every note he had played, every lesson he had learned, and every audience he had touched. Music had become a part of him, and he knew it would always be a source of joy, inspiration, and connection. In the end, the boy had come full circle. From the child who once begged to touch the piano to the young musician creating melodies that moved people, his journey had been remarkable. He had discovered that the true magic of music lay not just in skill, but in the heart and soul poured into each note. And as he continued to play, teach, and compose, he knew that the piano would always be his companion, his teacher, and his bridge to the world, carrying his music and his spirit far beyond the walls where it all began.